Welcome to IT in Motion, where we make autonomous IT entertaining and informative. My name is Sanjog.
And I'm Josh. We're your hosts. Today we're going to be talking to Erik Rudin, Vice President of Ecosystems at ScienceLogic. Everybody give it up for the mountain man from the West, Erik Rudin.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Some fancy stuff you got there.
Hey, just brought it for you, man. I mean, this whole crowd, this audience is here for
Yeah, they're
you.
excited.
All right, let's go. Let's talk. Talk about change.
Well, first, we're going to start out with an icebreaker, if that's all right with
Yeah.
you. Using a movie title or a TV show or even a book or a song, what reflects your life story, Erik?
Oh, geez. That's a lot of diversity getting to hear, but I'd say favorite book, big fan of Ray Dalio. He's an economist, very successful, but he's also a leader in thought, and I'm a thinker. So, and he wrote a book called Principles. It's a great book. Kind of talks a lot about concepts of the leading organizations and things that they need to think about, particularly around getting to idea meritocracy, to value ideas based on their merit, not on who said it or when or why, but really what's going to help the collective and improve the outcomes. So that's a book that I love. I've recommended to many people like you.
Yes.
And if you haven't read it, check it out.
Awesome.
All right. So next question, same kind of thing. Titles of movies, songs, video games. What's your ideal meal?
Well, I like thinking in multiple dimensions, and the one game that I play is called Clash of Clans. If you've ever played it, it's a fictitious land, and there's offense and defense. So I like the complexity because it keeps my brain active, and it's also collaborative because there's 50 other clanmates, and the group that I'm in is around disc golf. So I love disc golf. I love Clash of Clans. So the two married themselves together.
Awesome. And another one is describe your leadership style in some kind of form.
I'd say candor and directness is a big part of it, but empathy and just trying to understand people a bit more and listening. I started my career probably more talking than listening, and where I'm now is more listening than talking, although I love to talk, as you guys know. But I find that, talking to customers and partners, which is my job, really gives me better insight into the current state of things. And then where can I add value? And then how can people, learn from those approaches and those techniques? So I do a lot of mentoring, as you know. And I really found that solving the people issue, we're trying to fulfill their maximum self by applying a lot of the things that I've seen in my career has been very fulfilling and successful because I've seen a lot of people I've mentored move into new positions, cross domains within, not staying just one silo, but actually thinking about moving within the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I've really just come to really appreciate about ScienceLogic. It really just gives an opportunity for different folks, but it also requires a little bit of momentum from yourself. You got to find that energy to drive it. And so I tend to attract people to come and talk to me because they either like what I say or they feel like I can add value to their job. And you and I have had those conversations as well. So, I really enjoyed the journey. I've been with ScienceLogic for about 12 years, actually 12 and a half, but they've all been different. There's been a succession of new things. And I think that's one of the nice things about the company and the solution and the market we serve is that it's evolving.
Well, tell us a little bit about your journey from the humble beginnings that you came from and where you are now and how that's really evolved with what you're trying to impact these days.
Well, if you want to go way back, in college, I studied environmental science. And it's kind of weird. I call myself an ologist. So I took like ichthyology, dendrology, aquatic microbiology, geology. And what I really learned about that is that there's different ways to look at systems and that everything's interconnected, the carbon system, the nitrogen system, the water system. And so when I got into tech, I started to apply that concept about diving into a very challenging scenario like networking or TCP/IP or server management and how everything's all interconnected and related together. And so it was a really easy jump for me to go from science to technology.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that I love to learn. I love new things, and I found that I could always turn a page on another book. And back in the day, my first certification was Windows NT 351. And if you've some people weren't alive during
when 351 came out,
94, 95, but
it's been a minute.
That's when I started in my career, and then CCNA and so forth. But what I have found is that technology is innovative because you can change your approach.
Mhm.
So it gives you ability to navigate it and apply different ideas. And I love creativity and thinking about new ways of approaching a problem. And I think that's followed through my entire career is like, what is the next change? What is the next shift that's happening? And how can I use my knowledge, my experience, my mouth, and my connection with other people and try to drive some sort of benefit. And I feel like I've almost like accelerated the further I go in a lot of these conversations. So hopefully we can talk about some of that today.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things you're kind of passionate about is building a change, a
Culture
culture that's
change.
accepting of change, right? And it
Yeah.
embraces change.
Yeah, and I mean that goes. I run 4 teams, and some of them are small, some of them are big, but they all have challenges. They all have constraints. So the question is what are you going to do differently? What can you bring to the table tomorrow that you didn't know today that you just figured out, and help change and bring that kind of characteristics? And so, Josh, I've worked together on
Yeah.
the SDK project with Power Packs and what we're trying to do around content creation for our partners
Enablement. Yep.
and
Yeah.
solutions development, and really build that partner community around enabling them to build unique solutions on top of SL1.
Yeah. And it's requiring not just, changes for the customer. It's requiring us to change too, to reorganize and rebuild and think differently about what we're building so that we can be more customer centric and more geared towards this outcome we're looking for. And so, the change kind of needs to permeate and my from my perspective, you really need to have that vision towards the end game, right?
Mhm.
What are we building for? Maybe we don't get there as fast as we want. Maybe we
Sure.
take a few detours along the way, but where are we headed?
Yeah, and that's and I'm classically trained in product management, you understand the why, and the why is really around faster time to value with less resources to help business or help your customer. And I think from a Power Pack perspective, we've been trying to do that with tooling. We're doing that with standards. We're doing that with partner engagement. And so I'm seeing that accelerate within your team. So thank you. And also, with Bill's leadership, Bill Chella on that group has also been thinking about how do we structure as an organization to think about that
Yeah.
change, because that's somewhat disruptive, but at the same time, it's going to help create scale
Yeah.
by
Right.
using some of these new techniques.
Yep. So Eric, tell us a little bit about some of the adventures that you've been on recently. I know you've been traveling a lot to Amazon reInvent, and you just came back from Vegas. What were you doing out there?
Yeah. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, I like to get out and listen to a lot of the what's happening in the field. And most recently, I've been working with the federal team. ScienceLogic has being in DC based and also having a very secure platform. We really attracted that kind of customer. I was invited to be a panelist at a really awesome event called Edge 23. It's associated with CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. It's sponsored by the GBEF, which is the Government Business Executive Forum. So there's some great leaders there, and they really cultivate a great community of federal tech leaders together to talk about what's happening in the industry and how it's changing and how they can collaborate together. So had the privilege of co-moderating a session on IT modernization. So it was a great experience. I'd love to keep talking more about it, but it really was an opportunity to listen to what tech leaders are dealing with. And from that, there was kind of a unique epiphany or an observation that I think would be a good conversation for today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Great.
Let's dive into it. From what I remember, it's a little bit about culture change and
Yeah.
how having the right kind of change agents or characteristics within those change agents to deliver that.
Well, if you think about a system, like go back to that analogy, you have the brain that says stuff and then it sends a signal down to the muscles and it has to do things. And if you think of that from an organization, you think about it, cloud and DevOps and AI ops is a new thing. Some people don't know it, they don't know how to do it. And so the brain might be the leadership team saying, hey guys, we got to transform and we have to become more automated, more machine driven from insights that we get from these systems. And we have to do that faster, lower cost. And in some cases, a lot of our customers actually monetize these systems, so it's driving revenue. It's
Yeah.
also improving margin, improving GP, et cetera. So in order to do that, and this was what I saw at the event, is that a lot of these departments, particularly in the federal government, are transforming themselves. They're shifting away from older legacy systems to newer systems. They're moving to mobile. They're moving to software-defined systems. They're moving away from legacy stacks to containerized applications. And so, given that they often have a bit of let's say, a distributed workforce, some folks weren't around during that time. They don't know what a Kubernetes cluster is all about, right? So if you know at the top that you need to transform and to change your organization, the question is, how do you get there? Well, fortunately, what's happened over the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years is we've built this ecosystem of partners that have built technology stacks that help address that. But there's a gap, and the gap is starting to evolve. And the gap is that people in generally have a hard time changing their daily behavior. And so if I said, I like to talk about coffee. So if you don't mind, can we have a little chat about coffee?
Of course.
Let's talk coffee.
It's
All
one of my
right. So
favorite
we have a coffee
beverages.
cup right here.
Oh, coffee.
So
Yeah.
so Josh, so that's a great cup of coffee. But tomorrow we're going to transform that cup of coffee. We're actually going to change the type of beans, the way it's built, and the way you actually make it. It's going to be totally different. But I tell you, it's going to be better for you. It's going to help your health. It's going to help your energy level to be more energetic with your family. But I need you to change. I need you to shift the way you think about that cup of coffee tomorrow. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I would need to convince you in some way that this is a good thing for you or a good thing for the organization. So instead of saying, hey, you're using a legacy open source product or something that was built 20 years ago that doesn't really solve the cloud problem, I need to change that. That's going to have more machine insights and more automation and more of a service context
Yeah.
to the way you deliver services than what you had before. So I need you to change to think about that. So it's not like how the technology was built or what the specific thing. It's about shifting the mindset and getting them to think about a different way of solving the problem. And a good example of that in IT is around automating processes, automating workflows, and thinking through that from a transformational perspective. And this is the challenge that we deal with, but I think also particularly when talking to a lot of these federal leaders, they're struggling with this as well.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting because the observation is this: changing once is easy. Changing like for a consistent way of doing things on a daily basis is hard. Here's a great example. In January, everybody goes to the gym, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they do it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or they cut back on drinking for 2 or 3 weeks, and then guess what? They go back to
Back
their
to
old
the old
habits.
habits.
Yeah.
So the question is, psychologically, how do we create a sustaining culture of change within your mind or within your teams so that it's not about the technology as much as it's about people and process?
It's the DNA. It's got to be in their DNA, changed
Yeah.
completely, right?
Yeah, and so the panel that we talked about was around IT modernization, and I'd say that the thing that we accomplished two things. One, we didn't talk about technology. We talked about how to attract talent and to upskill individuals that may have that mindset, that
Yeah.
want to have that. Hey, I want to try the coffee, man. Like that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be the laggards and the late majority that may not come on board, and they don't take away my coffee, man. And so we got to work together as a community, as an ecosystem, to try to help with that. And that was one acknowledgement. The other thing was around recruitment. So we most recently I just wrote a blog around this, and it's really interesting. One of the panelists talked about this concept about talent, and that's within your team. What are the attributes that you're looking for? Like you asked me, like how would you define yourself? I talked about candor, creativity. Well, curiosity and creativity are two attributes of change-minded individuals, right? They're curious.
Yeah.
What does the coffee taste like? Right? So what does AI ops taste like? Show me what that is. Let me try it. And then I have to kind of force myself to keep using it so that I get more utility from that or I
Yeah.
really understand the benefits. So me and my team are actually working on something similar to that based on a lot of the conversations we had that started at that event about cultivating a lot of the best practices for change and figuring out that it can work, and you have to convince the rest of the organization that this is a good thing, that this is something that we can sustain. And that the good news is it's very measurable because a lot of what we do at ScienceLogic is create outcomes, and outcomes in our world is a metric,
Yeah.
right? And so the most common metric that we talk about is MTTR, right? Mean time to resolve. I'd argue that that's an older metric, and there's a lot of new metrics that we need to think about. Here's one for you: mean time between service incidents. So think about that. It's the gap between an incident and making that longer.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So instead of saying I'm going to resolve an incident faster or I have less incidents, I want to look at this like algorithmically, and I want to see that gap increase because that means I've automated the resolution at the edge, right?
Right. Right. Because the outcome you're driving for there is increased uptime, right? You want to make sure that whatever service you're delivering
Exactly.
that's business impacting stays up for as many people as long as possible.
I would say yes, but also I would shift it to, if you think about the metrics for what we tend to see with our customers, right? They're building applications, they're delivering services. To your point, it's around the experience,
Yeah.
right? They want fast experiences. What do you think the SLA is on a mobile app? It's a few seconds.
Seconds.
If you
Yeah.
can't get to that,
Definitely.
then it's failed. Well, in the back in the day with the VMs and clustered VMs and servers and whatnot, that was okay. We could do that. We could pool resources. But now with microservices, it's changing much faster. And if you
Right.
think about that, what's happening within networking, also cloud services, and the rate of different types of services that you're building your applications with, or you're designing architectures that are very scale out, it's now back to that, am I ensuring that my customers are, yes, getting access to it, but are they actually getting that rich experience?
Right. Is it running sufficiently well for their needs?
Right, and it varies, and so, to translate that into science logic speak, we think about that, about service health, service
Yeah.
availability,
Yep.
and then we also, because we typically serve the operations side, it's around making sure that the operators have confidence in the data,
Yeah.
right? And the
Yeah.
way that you get that confidence is through that interconnected set of data sets. It's not one data set, it's multiple.
Right.
And then we talk about heterogeneity and how we're going to deal with different types of data and then all that. So I don't want to get again back into the technology. So I think, from the event, what we really appreciate and what I learned to understand is that creating an environment around technology that really thinks differently is a
Mhm.
key measurement going forward. And what I also learned from that experience was that we have to collaborate with our government leaders who are doing these agencies as a collective between the technology ecosystem as well as with these government agencies, because we service a lot of them, right?
Right.
And so it's no longer, they're not in this defender national security and improve the services that we offer our veterans, for example. Like one of our larger customers, does that. We're in it for their mission,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And the government agencies talk about mission, right? They talk about mission performance, mission execution, and I really appreciated that because that gave us like a higher target, right? And if you think about that, and back to the comment that I heard, is that to achieve the mission, you need to have the right team, right? And
It's
the
the
team
culture.
has to have the right mindset.
Yeah.
And the mindset that we're looking for is called willing and able. So think about that. Let's go back to coffee. Josh, are you willing and able to transform your cup of coffee tomorrow? Do you have the mindset that would allow you to think about that?
Yeah. Enable. Do I have the ingredients? Do I have the equipment?
There you go. So part of that is training, part of
Yeah.
that's certification, part of that's, making sure that we've got the right information at the right time. And that's where I think there's a lot of different services and technology that can do that. That's also where you can lean on your ecosystem. So one of the questions that I asked the panel was, what can the ISV community do for the government agencies and departments? And the response was really interesting. And that was, oftentimes we're so focused on our individual missions, right? That they're trying to achieve, that they forget that they actually work in a community of different departments and agencies.
Mhm.
As a vendor, we're interacting with them, right?
Right.
I'm interacting with you, I'm interacting with you. But what I could do is actually, I could connect you together on the shared journey problems and the challenges you're having and share the best insights from what you learned with you.
Right.
And so the ISVs and the partners can actually act as a glue between the agencies and departments.
Mm.
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
That we are a potential advocate for best practices that other teams have learned that were not necessarily shared.
Yeah. It's a sort of secondary communications channel where you know, part A of the government doesn't talk to part B, C, D, E, all the way through Z,
Yeah,
but we talk to several of them, and so we can learn from them and bring them together, bring that knowledge across, and
yeah,
really help them all achieve their important missions.
yeah. I mean, everyone's doing it differently, and the one thing about IT is that it's hard to be consistent because
Yes.
there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Cross.
There's a lot of variability.
I can't tell you how many times when I was a professional services engineer, I'd talk to somebody and they tell me about something entirely new, and I'd say, "Well, tell me about what that is." And they say, "Are you kidding me? This is the industry standard." So every company was doing what they thought was the industry standard, and every company was different.
Yeah, so I think we're listening to those agencies and thinking about that. The second thing that they said about that question was solve a hard problem for me that I have today, and I thought that was great because it says, this is my challenge. Can you help me overcome this particular thing? And do you have something in your toolbox or an approach that can be very outcome specific? And so again, it goes back to that listening
Yeah,
aspect about engagement and then listening and then having that flexibility, learning from your experiences and applying that in different ways. And then, being a bridge and building that community. And so as an ecosystem guy, as a science guy, as a, true ecosystem person, I love that aspect of what we're doing.
Absolutely. And you're bringing it back full circle. Actually,
yeah.
we appreciate you joining us on this call today. I was wondering if you had a few tips for the listeners as to how they can kind of encourage that culture change and that mentality change that you were talking about. Any advice for folks listening in?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the thing that we're really trying to do, and this is something that we've learned recently, is just learn from the people that have gone through that journey before, right? And that's something that, like, back to Ray, like Ray's gone through this. He's built a very scalable, successful business. I want to learn from Ray,
Yeah.
right? So I would love to encourage our audience to come and engage with us and learn from us and what we've found out, and then learn from their peers in their organization. That's why the Edge 23 event was so awesome, because it was about collaboration and unity and working on shared missions on a greater good around national security. But it's also working with the partners, working with the other departments, and then figuring out how do we going to overcome these hard problems.
Right.
And so that's the opportunity is collaboration, it's engagement.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Erik, we do appreciate you joining us today. As I had mentioned, I know that you probably need to run off to a meeting in a few. So, again, if listeners want to learn more from you and your experiences, where can they learn a little bit more about you and some of the events that you go to
Yeah,
and
well,
things that you
very
learn?
simple. Very active on LinkedIn. Love that platform. That's also a community,
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that algorithm is that, I know you guys were doing a session on ChatGPT, and I've connected with some AI leaders, and I really just I scan that like multiple times a day, just looking to see what's going on within my network, and I've learned so much just from that
Yes.
piece of what's happening.
Sure.
And I guess I like the LinkedIn algorithm. But so if you want to engage with me, I would love to hear from you. Connect with me. I'm an open networker. And then obviously, if we're in the field, let's set up a meeting and let's talk.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us today, Eric.
Thanks for having
Everybody,
me.
again, thank you. And one more
All right.
time. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please subscribe in your favorite podcast app. We're hosted on YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, and many other podcast platforms. If you'd like to see more, go to sciencelogic.com/podcast.